I've got 5 minutes to show you why Shinji Ikari never had a chance. Not because he was weak or scared or unwilling to fight, but because every so-called choice in his life was rigged from the start. And the deeper I went into Evangelion, the more I realized this wasn't just a story about giant robots and apocalyptic stakes. It was about how systems twist our will into weapons, how heroism can be manufactured out of trauma. Keep watching because what I found changes the way you see not just Shinji, but the entire idea of what it means to be a hero.
父さん。
出撃。
ちょっとレイはまだ動かせないでしょ。パイロットがいないわよ。
碇シンジ君、
はい。
あなたが乗るのよ。
え？今来たばかりのこの子にはとても無理よ。
座っていればいいわ。それ以上は望みます。
無理だよ、そんなの。見たことも聞いたこともないのにできるわけないよ。やります。僕が乗ります。
Part 1. The Phantom Hero's Journey. Every great hero starts with a refusal of the call. Luke doesn't want to leave Tatooine. Frodo doesn't want to carry the ring. Its narrative tradition is woven so deeply into our storytelling DNA that we barely question it anymore. The protagonist initially resists their destiny before ultimately embracing it, and when Shinji first encounters Unit 01, his refusal seems to fit this pattern with disturbing precision. Here's our reluctant hero, faced with an impossible task, naturally hesitant before what should be his eventual acceptance and transformation. But look closer, really examine the mechanics at work here, and I can't help noticing the cracks in this interpretation become chasms that swallow everything we think we know about heroic narratives. Traditional heroes refuse the call because they don't believe in themselves yet. They're incomplete, unformed, needing the crucible of adventure to discover their true potential. They need to grow into their role, to shed their ordinary world skin, and emerge transformed. Shinji refuses because he instinctively understands something the audience might miss on first viewing, something that cuts through the familiar heroic framework, like a knife through silk. He's not being offered heroism, he's being conscripted into trauma. The manipulation starts immediately, and it's breathtakingly cynical in its execution. When Gendo shows him Rey's broken body and tells him to pilot, or she'll have to do it again, this isn't Obi-Wan revealing Luke's heritage or Gandalf explaining the ring's significance. This isn't a mentor guiding a chosen one toward their destiny. It's emotional blackmail, pure and simple, weaponizing a 14-year-old's basic human decency against him. The message is clear. If you don't comply, this girl's suffering is in your hands. What kind of choice is that, really? What makes this manipulation particularly insidious is how it masquerades as choice. I've seen this pattern in real life, too, how abusers twist freedom into obligation. Shinji could walk away, technically, but walking away means watching Rey suffer, means letting humanity fall to the angels. This is the kind of false choice that abusers present to their victims: comply willingly or watch others pay the price for your resistance. The series wants us to believe Shinji chose his path, but choice requires genuine alternatives, not manufactured guilt. The weight of this false heroism becomes suffocating as the story progresses. In traditional narratives, mentors prepare heroes for their trials, offering wisdom and support. Gendo offers nothing but cold indifference punctuated by strategic moments of acknowledgement. When he finally offers praise after the battle with Sahakweil, it's not paternal pride, it's the calculated reward a trainer gives a performing animal. That moment gutted me, because I've known what it's like to crave approval from someone who only gives it to control you. Shinji's desperate hunger for this approval reveals just how starved he is for genuine connection, making him the perfect victim for this particular brand of psychological warfare. The trials that follow subvert every expectation we might have about character growth through adversity. Each angel battle should make Shinji stronger, more confident, more heroic. Instead, they progressively strip away his sense of self. When he defeats Sahakweil, there's no triumphant music or cheering crowds. Just a boy screaming in terror as he realizes what he's become capable of. The Eva itself becomes complicit in this trauma, moving without his consent, acting on violent impulses he never authorized. This is where Evangelion reveals its most brutal insight about the nature of trauma. It compounds. Each battle doesn't just add another layer of damage. It actively undermines Shinji's ability to process previous wounds. The series presents this as psychological realism, but there's something almost sadistic about how thoroughly it dismantles the traditional coming-of-age narrative. Where other stories might offer glimpses of healing or growth, Evangelion seems determined to prove that some damage cannot be undone. The relationship dynamics only deepen this sense of entrapment. Misato positions herself as the caring adult in Shinji's life, but her own brokenness makes her unable to provide the support he desperately needs. She fluctuates between treating him like a child and like a soldier, never finding the balance that might actually help him heal. Their shared meals and domestic moments feel genuine, yet they're always overshadowed by the reality that she's still part of the machine using him. Even her kindness becomes another form of manipulation, making him more willing to pilot, because he doesn't want to disappoint someone who's shown him affection. It made me realize how affection itself can be weaponized when someone controls the terms. The psychological architecture of heroism demands that each challenge faced makes the hero more equipped for the next one, building toward an inevitable confrontation where all lessons learned converge into triumph. But Shinji's battles create a different kind of learning, each one teaching him new ways to doubt himself, new reasons to fear his own power, new evidence that he's fundamentally unsuited for the role everyone insists he must play. Later, when forced to fight the possessed Unit 03 with Toji inside, Shinji faces the horrifying reality that his role as hero means potentially killing his classmates. As Bardiel takes control in Unit 01 under the dummy plug system, crushes the entry plug, Shinji screams in horror, pleading for his father to stop, his sense of agency utterly shattered. This isn't just guilt, it's the complete collapse of any heroic identity he might have constructed. The moment strips away all pretense and reveals what the series has been building toward. The recognition that he's not a hero at all, just a weapon pointed at targets he never chose. These aren't trials that forge a hero, they're a systematic dismantling of a child's psyche disguised as character development. The hero's journey promises transformation through struggle, but Shinji's struggles only serve to confirm his worst fears about himself, that he's worthless, that he hurts everyone he touches, that he's fundamentally broken. The narrative structure tricks us into expecting growth where only decay is possible. What's perhaps most disturbing is how the series weaponizes our own expectations against us. I felt betrayed by my own assumptions, realizing how deeply conditioned I was to expect a happy ending. We've been conditioned by countless stories to believe that suffering leads to strength, that trials create heroes, that young protagonists will eventually find their courage and save the day. Evangelion takes these assumptions and turns them inside out, showing us what happens when the support systems that make heroic growth possible simply don't exist. Without genuine mentorship, without healthy relationships, without a sense of agency or choice, the hero's journey becomes a nightmare of repeated trauma disguised as destiny. The Phantom Hero's journey promises transformation, but delivers only more sophisticated forms of the same fundamental wound. For me, this was the most haunting lesson of all. Shinji never truly grows because he's never given the tools or environment necessary for growth, just more elaborate ways to blame himself for circumstances beyond his control.
シンジ君、日本中のエネルギーあなたに預けるわ。頑張ってね。はい。電子凝縮システム正常。4、3、なんですって？ 2、1。発射。まずい。シンジ君。盾が持たない。まだなの？あと10秒。
Part 2. The Weight of Manufactured Destiny. Here's what makes Shinji's tragedy particularly cruel. His destiny was manufactured by the very people who should have protected him. In classic hero narratives, destiny feels inevitable and right. Arthur was always meant to pull Excalibur from a stone. Neo was always meant to be the one. These heroes discover they were special all along. But Shinji discovers he was engineered to be disposable, crafted like a broken tool designed to break at just the right moment. What gets me is how intentional it all feels. Gendo didn't abandon his son out of grief alone, though grief certainly played its part in those early devastating months after Yui's contact experiment. He abandoned him so that when the time came, Shinji would be desperate enough for approval to pilot ELVA Unit 01. The script reveals its cruelest irony here. Every moment of Shinji's childhood isolation serves Nerve's ultimate purpose: his social anxiety, his desperate need for validation, his fear of abandonment. These aren't character flaws to overcome, but features carefully cultivated by his father's neglect. Like a bonsai tree pruned into the desired shape through strategic cutting, Gendo created the perfect pilot by creating the perfect victim, and the more I think about it, the more horrifying it becomes to see love turned into a tool for manipulation. The silence between them during their rare encounters isn't just emotional distance. It's the sound of a trap being methodically set over 14 years. Visualize a young Shinji clutching a letter from his father, standing alone at a phone booth, hoping for a connection that never comes, his small heart sinking with each unanswered call. But Gendo never responds. He's too busy orchestrating human instrumentality to bother with school plays or birthday parties. Those misconnections aren't accidents, they're investments. Each disappointment is a calculated withdrawal from Shinji's emotional bank account, leaving him so starved for paternal recognition that he'll risk his life for even a momentary nod of approval. This manufactured destiny extends beyond just Gendo's machinations, weaving through the corridors of power where men in suits decide the fate of children they'll never meet. Seele's scenarios require not a hero, but a broken boy who will crack at precisely the right moment. They don't need someone strong enough to save the world, they need someone fragile enough to end it according to their specifications. It chills me to realize that in their eyes, his pain isn't a tragedy, it's an asset. The third impact doesn't happen despite Shinji's psychological breakdown, it happens because of it. As Gendo himself coldly believes that no one else can pilot EVA Unit 01 except for Shinji, and in that clinical assessment lies the horror of a father who views his son as a necessary component rather than a beloved child. The psychological architecture of this conspiracy becomes even more disturbing when you consider how it mirrors real-world systems of control. Much like Housho Tucker from Fullmetal Alchemist represents the banality of evil in his casual destruction of what should be sacred bonds, Gendo's methodical emotional abuse masquerades as necessity. Every adult in Shinji's life becomes complicit. Misato offers conditional care tied to his performance as a pilot. Rei exists as a replacement designed to make him feel replaceable, and even his classmates unknowingly participate by maintaining the social isolation that keeps him dependent on Nerve for human connection. His moment of greatest perceived failure, that gut-wrenching scene in End of Evangelion where he breaks down completely, is simultaneously his moment of greatest utility to the shadow organizations that have been manipulating every aspect of his existence since birth. They needed him broken, and they got exactly what they ordered. Even Unit 01 participates in this elaborate, cruel pretense of false destiny. The EVA doesn't choose Shinji because he possesses some unique, heroic quality or hidden strength waiting to be unlocked. It responds to him because it literally contains his mother's soul fused into its core during that catastrophic contact experiment years ago. His supposedly unique synchronization rate isn't a testament to his hidden potential as the chosen one. It's simply the inevitable result of a traumatic psychic bond with a mother he can't even remember losing, like a phantom limb that still aches long after amputation. That part hits me hardest, the idea that what makes him valuable is also what keeps him wounded. The robot that appears to represent his power and growing importance in saving humanity is actually the site of his deepest injury, and piloting it forces him to relive that primal trauma repeatedly. Every battle becomes an unconscious reunion with Yui, every victory a reminder of what was taken from him before he could even form the memory of loss. The machine that makes him valuable to others makes him a stranger to himself, trapping him in a cycle where his greatest strength is inseparable from his deepest pain.
人の定めか。人の希望は悲しみに綴られているね。ありがとう、シンジ君。
薫君、どうして？
滅びの時を免れ、未来を与えられる生命体は一つしか選ばれないんだ。僕が生き続けることが僕の運命だからだよ。結果、人が滅びてもね。君たちには未来が必要だ。ありがとう。
Part 3. The Tragedy of False Agency. The cruelest deception that Neon Genesis Evangelion orchestrates, both against Shinji Ikari and against us, the unsuspecting audience, lies not in its apocalyptic imagery or its complex conspiracies, but in something far more insidious: the carefully constructed illusion of meaningful choice. We watch episode after episode as this 14-year-old boy appears to navigate critical decisions that will shape not only his own fate, but the destiny of humanity itself. Yet beneath this surface narrative of adolescent agency lurks a more disturbing truth. Every apparent crossroads in Shinji's journey has been engineered, every option pre-selected, every path predetermined by adults who have never once considered him as anything more than a sophisticated biological component in their grand design. Consider the very foundation of Shinji's involvement with Nerve. When Gendo summons his abandoned son to Tokyo 3, the boy is presented with what appears to be a binary choice: pilot the Evangelion or leave. I remember pausing here, thinking, this isn't a choice, it's emotional blackmail. But this is a choice only in the most technical sense, like offering a drowning person the option between two different life preservers while standing safely on shore. I've been in situations like that, not with world-ending consequences, of course, but where every choice was rigged and walking away was never truly an option. Shinji can choose to pilot Unit 01 and remain in close to the father who discarded him, enduring psychological torture in exchange for fleeting moments of paternal acknowledgement. Alternatively, he can choose to walk away, returning to a world where he exists as a social ghost, friendless and purposeless, carrying the additional burden of having failed in his one moment of potential significance. This pattern of false agency permeates every relationship Shinji attempts to forge, and this is where the show started feeling almost cruelly personal for me. The connections he desperately seeks, those fragile threads of human understanding that might anchor him to sanity, are always tainted by the power structures that define his existence. His bond with Rei Ayanami, which develops slowly from mutual isolation into something resembling friendship, is built upon a foundation of deliberate manipulation. Rei exists not as an autonomous individual capable of genuine affection, but as a carefully crafted psychological tool designed to trigger specific emotional responses from a third child. When Shinji reaches out to her, seeking the comfort of shared understanding, he's unknowingly extending his hand toward a mirror that reflects back only what his handlers have programmed it to show. The relationship with Asuka Langley Soryu follows a similar trajectory of manufactured intimacy. Their partnership, which oscillates between antagonistic competition and desperate mutual need, operates within the rigid parameters of their shared military function. They are not two teenagers who happen to find each other. They are two weapons assigned to the same arsenal, their emotional development secondary to their operational compatibility. When they clash, it's not truly personal. It's the inevitable friction between two damaged instruments forced into close quarters. When they connect, those moments of genuine understanding occur despite the system, not because of it. Perhaps nowhere is this manufactured agency more heartbreakingly evident than in Shinji's encounter with Kaworu Nagisa. Here, finally, seems to be a relationship unburdened by military hierarchy or parental manipulation, a pure connection between two young people who understand each other's pain. Kaworu offers Shinji something no one else has: unconditional acceptance without demand for reciprocal utility. He doesn't need Shinji to pilot anything, doesn't require him to be useful, doesn't ask him to justify his existence through performance. Yet even this relationship, the one that feels most authentically chosen, most genuinely mutual, reveals itself as perhaps the cruelest manipulation of all. Kaworu's affirmation of Shinji's worth carries the weight of absolute acceptance, the promise that someone in this universe values Shinji Ikari simply for existing. But this moment of perfect understanding is itself a construct, designed to achieve maximum psychological impact when the inevitable betrayal occurs. Kaworu's love is real, but his presence in Shinji's life is not coincidental. He has been sent, programmed, positioned to offer hope, precisely so that its destruction will serve a larger purpose. This web of false choices extends beyond romantic or familial relationships into the very architecture of Shinji's daily existence. The tragedy deepens when we recognize that Shinji himself begins to internalize these false parameters of choice. He learns to measure his worth through his utility, to gauge his relationships through their operational success, to understand love as something that must be earned through performance rather than something that exists independently of achievement. His sense of agency becomes so thoroughly colonized by external expectations that even his most private thoughts echo the voices of his manipulators. When Shinji finally reaches his psychological breaking point, when the accumulated weight of false choices and manufactured relationships becomes too much to bear, his response feels like the first truly autonomous action he's taken in the entire series. The decision to trigger third impact, to dissolve the barriers between individual consciousness and merge all of humanity into a single entity, represents a rejection of the entire system that has defined his existence. At that moment, I almost wanted to cheer for him, because I felt that same desperate urge to burn everything down just to escape a rigged game. If individual identity leads only to pain, if personal relationships inevitably become tools of manipulation, if choice itself is nothing more than an elaborate illusion, then perhaps the solution is to abandon the very concept of individual agency altogether. Yet, even this ultimate act of rebellion serves someone else's agenda. Gendo has been working toward instrumentality from the beginning, and Shinji's psychological collapse provides the perfect catalyst for implementing the human instrumentality project. The boy's most desperate attempt to assert control over his own destiny becomes, instead, the final piece in his father's grand design. The son's rebellion becomes the father's triumph, and what felt like agency reveals itself as just another form of manipulation. It made me realize sometimes even our rebellion is part of the script. The most devastating aspect of Shinji's story is not the cosmic scale of the destruction he inadvertently enables, but the intimate scale of the autonomy he never possessed. In a narrative filled with giant robots and ancient conspiracies with gods and monsters and the fate of human consciousness itself hanging in the balance, the most profound tragedy is also the most personal, the systematic elimination of a child's right to determine his own path through existence. This creates a particularly cruel form of dramatic irony. We, as viewers, are positioned to witness Shinji's struggles with the expectation that he will eventually overcome his limitations and seize control of his destiny. The narrative structure of the mecha genre, with its emphasis on young protagonists learning to master powerful machines and save the world, trains us to anticipate his eventual triumph. We wait for the moment when he will stop being a victim and start being a hero, when he will transform his suffering into strength and his confusion into clarity. But that moment never comes, because it was never meant to come. Shinji Ikari exists within a narrative framework that has been specifically designed to prevent his growth into genuine agency. Every apparent opportunity for development has been carefully calibrated to reinforce his dependence on external validation rather than foster internal strength. He is not a protagonist in the traditional sense. He is a protagonist-shaped object designed to fulfill the dramatic function of a hero while being systematically denied the psychological tools necessary for heroism. The boy who appeared destined to reshape the world according to his will was actually being reshaped by the world according to someone else's vision. Each choice he seemed to make was actually a choice being made about him. Each relationship he seemed to form was actually a relationship being formed around him. Each moment of agency he seemed to grasp was actually a moment of manipulation he was failing to recognize. Shinji Ikari's greatest tragedy is not that he triggered the end of the world. It's that he was never allowed to be the author of his own story, even when that story was supposedly about him. And maybe that's the part I can't stop thinking about. How many of us are living stories we didn't write?